Okay, well, the first thing that I'm going to do is just to say a big welcome to everyone who is watching or listening to this anywhere around the world. And it's Liam Hartley back with you today with episode 506 of the Simply Inspired podcast. Today, joined by Nicole Harvick. Hopefully, I'm saying that the right way. And most of our audience will be familiar with this by now, but for anyone who isn't, I am joining you today from the lovely coast of Cyprus, there, the east coast specifically. So hopefully our sound and visuals will hold up okay. They usually do. And I'm very, very excited to welcome Nicole to the show because she is an absolutely remarkable lady who is having a very positive impact on the lives of so many people all around the world as a forgiveness expert and an intuitive energy healer, somebody who is world renowned for her expertise, healing abilities, and understanding, has been featured on the cover of many magazines, including Forbes Morocco. Is also a contributory author to The Change, a remarkable book which also features Les Brown and other guests as well, I believe. But in
Mhm.
short, Nicole will have her own definitions for what she does, guys, and that's up to her. I'm just going to say she's a remarkable lady who is having a positive impact on so many people and really touching a lot of lives, helping people to vibrate higher and really grow into the best version of themselves. So today, this is not only Nicole's story, this is very much something that we are creating so that you guys, wherever you're listening from, can hopefully take away some tips, some inspiration, some relatability, some understanding, all of that kind of stuff to help you in your lives one way or another. That's why I'm doing this, and I know that Nicole matches that intention very, very well with what she does. So, thank you very, very much for taking time out of your morning to do this, and it is a pleasure to be with you today.
Well, I am honored to be here. I am an open book, so feel free to ask away. I hide nothing. And as I've said before, for very long I hid who I was. I was very cautious with my words, but now it's like, I have guides that have told me, you've been given something very special. You must speak up about it. So here I am.
Oh, that is wonderful. And like we were talking about before we started with the coastal lifestyle and where you live now, where I live, that is another point that we actually have in common because I'm very guided to who I choose to interview. It's not as logical as it may appear. I'm often, I hear about somebody and I get the feeling or not to kind of go in that direction. So it's a similar reason for both of us, just so you know that. In terms of the story, I would actually like to start with that aspect of hiding yourself and into stepping into your authentic self. Now, this is a question, and by the way, I'm very relaxed, very straightforward, and I'm not going to ambush you with anything by any means. I mean, it's just to make your spiritual path relatable in the first part of this, and then to broaden out into some bigger picture topics of how this energy healing actually works. But I have to consider some people might be hearing your story for the first time, even though I'm sure most of people have heard of you already. So that's why I'm asking about your own transformative process, and particularly what you said there, Nicole, about hiding your light, if you like, for a long time, and now opening up and sharing that with the world. I think that's a great place to start because that is something that a lot of people struggle with. So, can you share with us a little bit about that process of stepping into your power? And we'll begin there just to get the ball rolling. Thank you so
That
much.
that's actually a perfect place to start. And what I will tell you is, as growing up, I always knew that I was different. I kept quiet about it, but even my mom would tell people, well, she's the odd one. But as a young child, I knew things. I had things happen. I was just very connected to the universe, but I didn't back then. When you're 10 years old, you don't know what that means. You have no idea. So as I started getting older and stepping into, you have to have a career, you have to get married, you have to have children, things morphed, and I went more into that third dimensional existence of, getting up every day, going to work, taking your kids here, taking your kids there. And my catalyst for this huge change was in 2013. And I found out that the person I'd been married to for 25 years had been lying, cheating, and, just I found out horrendous stories. And the way I found out was my daughter, who was in sixth grade at the time, her iPod Touch was synced with his iPhone. So she started getting message dumps and picture dumps and just, all kinds of things a sixth grader shouldn't see or hear. And so that put me into a very huge spiral. And so what I started doing, because I knew I had to take care of myself, I had two daughters watching me. I started finding modalities to heal myself. And I took those classes myself for me. And I started telling people is that, I have enough certificates to wallpaper my whole house practically. And while that helped me, it didn't heal me. And so I started losing my hair. I started scratching my skin until I bled. I was literally going on muscle memory every single day, trying to deal with my kids, get them to, volleyball lessons, to dance lessons. And I knew I had to do something to help me. And then I heard this word, and this is too long of a story to tell, but I found something called Ho'oponopono. And that is an ancient Hawaiian forgiveness practice. It consists of four phrases, and it's I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. Now, I had been going to all kinds of meetings, to psychologists, to psychiatrists, and nothing was helping. And I thought, this is free. How can this help me? And so I thought, that's silly, but I just heard try it, try it. And so I thought, okay, I know when I'm getting a message like that, I must take it very seriously. So when I do something like that, I do it very early after I wake up, because what happens is our subconscious is very active because we're still kind of in between worlds right there, or at night before I go to bed. I started repeating those words every morning when I woke up, every night before I went to bed. And I'm going to say probably within a few weeks, I felt different. I could feel anger melting away. I could feel hate melting away. And the most amazing thing is I started to look different, because all of those dense emotions of hate and animosity and anger, those will rip you apart. Those will absolutely tear you apart. And so I just kept doing this over and over and over. And I thought to myself, I've been through that hard divorce. I can resonate with feelings of such, of being, abandoned, being mistreated, being married to a narcissist who was always putting me down. You're uneducated, you're untrained, do this, do that. And so I thought, okay, I can help people. And when I realized the essential key was forgiveness, that's when I really started this journey of understanding how important it was to help people on this journey, men and women. People forget men. They forget that men have feelings, men have emotions, and men are trained, oh, well, we can't cry. Well, that's just silly. So that's really how I started this journey. And as I reflect back on it, I always say it didn't happen to me, it happened for me. And that is my goal today, to get that part of my journey out there and to help others. So that really started opening the door to everything spiritual.
Wow, what an inspiring story. What an inspiring way to kick things off and get things going. I must say, I mean, it's terrible what happened to you, but the way you've used it for good, for your own healing and to help the world is just so inspiring. And I will come to forgiveness shortly because forgiveness is obviously a massive part of what you do, and it's also, I feel, very misunderstood in the world today. But before we come to that, I have one other sort of brief question here. It's more than forgiveness with you, Nicole. It's the fact that you believe in magic and love and all of the good things in the world, if you like, despite this happening to you. And I know that might sound a little bit abstract, but it's just something I love, like when I hear you speak and when I see your posts and just, just the whole vibe that comes from you. And I know that comes from the forgiveness. But before we get there, I just want to talk a little bit with you about sort of keeping the faith and the belief in the goodness that's in people and the goodness that's in the world, despite you being betrayed in such a horrific and brutal way. And obviously, from what you were describing there, undermined and hurt so many times prior to that. But if that question makes sense, it's something that I feel that pull we were talking about, that intuitive feeling to ask you about believing in the good that's in people, despite negative experiences we may have, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely. And the one thing that you mentioned is love. And that is one of the highest vibrations. And that self-love came as a byproduct of forgiveness because I never realized, I never even thought about loving myself. I loved my children, my parents, my dog, but it never dawned on me that I could love myself. And I started reflecting on that. And I thought, well, how, what kind of love am I giving out if I don't love myself? And so that really started a journey in and of itself. And I started realizing that to love properly, you must start with self. You must forgive yourself, which I started with. And, one of the things I was most angry about was not using my words to protect myself. I just shut down and I was quiet about everything. And when I started forgiving myself for all of that, this crazy immense amount of love just flowed through my body. And it was a, it was such a euphoric feeling. I thought, my gosh, is this what love is? This feeling? And then I thought back to having my babies, and I thought, oh my God, I love myself unconditionally now. And I forgave myself because everything I did at certain times, I did with the knowledge I had then. I did the best I could. Nothing was out of anger or hate. And so loving myself has created a way to, I don't always like what people do. I see a lot of things I don't care for, but I love them on a soul level. And that's really different than loving someone just in their human form. It's understanding that there's a purity in their soul that we all have. Sometimes we just forget, or sometimes their traumas and angers have kind of pushed that soul a little bit to the side and brought in ego. And so I understand that we all have this, pretty much everyone has this capacity to love themselves and love others unconditionally. And I honestly walk by people and I can feel a vibration. And if it feels like low and static, I send love to them. If it feels very high and fluid, I want to have a conversation.
I love that. I absolutely well. I love that answer as soon as we're talking about love. But no, it really is a beautiful description, and it really is something that people don't always understand about the conditional versus unconditional aspect. And we'll talk some more about that. We'll talk some more about ego as well. That's a very important topic. Before those things, though, comes forgiveness itself, something that you are a renowned expert on, and something that you have really had to experience, as you're saying there, for yourself and for others. Oh, by the way, just so I don't forget to say, Nicole, I love that answer as well about learning to love yourself truly, because although this might be controversial to some people, I do think that women are taught to put others first more than men, obviously, and so they're to sort of put their own self-love on the back burner a lot of times. So it's a really powerful message, just to underpin that, just so I don't forget to say. But anyway, coming back to forgiveness, I mean, people misunderstand what forgiveness actually is, and I'm sure you speak about this all of the time. But for anyone listening to this who's not sure what it actually means to really forgive yourself, to really forgive someone else, etc., There's misconceptions about this. So can we delve into your experiences of what forgiveness actually is, please, as a very important topic? Thank you.
Absolutely. And I love that you bring this up because when I first started talking about it, and still to this day, it's met with resistance, mostly from women, which I found really interesting. And gosh, I don't even know how long ago it was, but I remember talking to a lady and talking about, forgiving your ex, forgiving yourself. And she's like, well, what do I have to forgive myself for? I didn't do blah, blah, blah. Well, regardless, there are two in a relationship. So you can't tell me there were not maybe words said or something that happened. But I always explain that when you forgive, you're not condoning those actions. What you're doing is releasing those actions so you don't have that pain, that hurt, and that anger lingering in your body. And I always say, with what they did to you, they couldn't have cared that much about you in terms of, maybe loving you the way they should. Why would you want to continue to carry around that pain and anguish that was inserted in you from their words and deeds? I said, you're not condoning anything. You don't ever have to see that person again. You don't have to say anything to them. I said, forgiveness is actually a selfish thing because it's just for you, only for you. And it clears so much out of your body, the negativities. You can start inserting positive emotions, joy, love, happiness. And so when people start understanding that this is for them, they see it a little bit differently, and they understand that, they don't ever have to see that person or tell them. Some want to because that's kind of an ego thing. And to me, I will tell you that I never said anything about it. And to this day, I send love to my ex-husband because whatever you send out comes back, but because he can't love himself. He cannot love himself. That was a huge part of the narcissistic behavior, is you give this appearance of someone who's very sure of themselves, but inside gives away everything. So what I would do is just send love to that man that did that to me, because I've changed, I've forgiven, and I know what I give to him will come back to me.
That is powerful because there's another aspect to this when we're talking about love as well, Nicole, which is the fact that, oh, actually, when we're talking about forgiveness, the fact that some people think it's an outward thing, and we're talking it has inward and outward qualities. But what you said there about the fact we're doing this for ourselves. But then there's also then another layer of forgiveness and letting go. But then there's another layer again of actually sending love to that person. And the thing that struck me about that with your ex-husband is obviously the forgiveness itself is incredible after something or so many things that he was doing. But then to actually send love as well and to actually um, love your enemies, so to speak, as you know, as they say in this type of thing, that is a whole other layer. Now, does that come from, would you say, the depth of understanding as to why he was doing what he was doing? Because you said something there that I feel, again, I feel that feeling. So just focus in on this for a moment, that he couldn't love himself. And you mentioned that, and I feel that a lot of people, when they're working on forgiveness, don't always understand why people do what they do. And as you're aware from this situation, people don't wake up in the morning and think, oh, I'm going to hurt someone or I'm going to do this or do that. In that sense, in the sense, there's always a series of steps and usually pain within them that leads to that point. Can we go a little bit deeper into that topic of actually not just forgiving someone, but actually loving someone who has hurt you and the implications of that, please?
Yeah,
If that makes
absolutely. And what I tell people when we talk about it is to think back to them as a little child or a baby. We all start out kind of as empty vessels, and whoever our parents are, our situation, whatever's going on is going to influence who we are, what we feel, and how we relate and or treat others. So in my ex's case, he saw his mother try to commit suicide at age 7. So when you go back to something that traumatic, it's almost as if their growth stops at that point. That was so traumatic, it shut down everything. And so I don't have sympathy for him because he's a very smart man, but I have empathy for his situation and what caused that. And I remember one time he said to me, he says, I'm a very self-loathing person. And that must feel awful. I don't know because I learned to love myself. But what angst that would create in a human to not like yourself. So what we always forget when someone hurts us like that is what hurt them that makes them feel like they have to hurt us. And there is always something, unless they're just a psychopath. But we all start out as this little baby that, your mother's holding you, loving you. Not everyone, of course, but always reflect back to what could have happened, or if you know what happened, and just remember that we all have issues, we all have problems, and it's how we deal with it. I dealt with mine by forgiveness and love, and he chose not to. He chose to continue with the ego, the self-depreciating talk, the self-depreciating words. And so we really are on two different vibrations. But I still have that empathy there for him as a human being that's been hurt and a soul that needs the love.
That is very powerful, very, very powerful. And as I've said, another misconception, misunderstanding that is really important we address today because, it doesn't condone anything that anyone is doing. But I've had this conversation from both sides, by the way, Nicole, not to go off on a tangent here, but you'll find it interesting when I interview people who are the people who need to forgive, but also sometimes people, if they've changed sufficiently and if they're doing something good with it, who were the people doing bad things in one way or another, and people who used to be criminals or something terrible and they've changed, they teach others through that process. And it's very interesting to talk about both sides so that people can have a better understanding and so that they can heal. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate your openness and vulnerability with all of these topics. I mean, I know this is what you do, this is what you speak on, but still, I mean, it's not an easy thing to talk about your wounds, if you like, even if they are healed, to help others. So I just wanted to say that. Now, you mentioned about the ego, and earlier today, when I was preparing some notes for this, I was listening to a video of you talking about ego on YouTube, and it was some clips that somebody had put together. It's a very important topic. It's a very misunderstood topic yet again. That would be a theme today. But you spoke earlier about the third dimensional aspect, even with your own life, of those sort of very traditional expectations, going to school, going to work, taking the kids to school, all of these sorts of things. So when it comes to rising out of that, and when it comes to understanding and transcending our ego, I would like to talk a little bit about that process. But I guess we'll have to start again just to include everybody with what ego actually means. So may we talk about that a little bit, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. And the way I look at ego is it's kind of your protection armor. It people think it's there to protect you. They have a misconception of it. And what it's really doing is it's creating a person that might not be who you are or who you want to be. And so with me, what I started doing, because believe me, I was in lending and real estate as a woman, and I had an ego, not in the way of money or things, but I had to have that ego to keep the wolves at bay. So I was very harsh with my words, and that was my protection. That was my absolute protection from getting away from that. So I would use my words pretty harsh, very harsh. And as I started this journey of enlightenment, of raising my vibration, my frequency, it dawned on me that I no longer needed that ego. Because even if someone, driving, you have the road rage. Well, that's the ego of wanting to be right, always wanting to be right. If you go out there and meet with people that tell you something and you maybe have a different idea on something, they can't live with that. They want to argue. And see, I don't want any more of that in my life. I want calmness, I want serenity, and I want peace, because those are very positive emotions to have in your body. And not only that, I don't want to say I don't care, but it doesn't bother me anymore that someone has a different opinion. I took the ego off and I don't need to argue with you, because you're who you are and have your belief, and I'm who I am and have my belief. And I'll tell you just a quick story of yesterday. I was talking to a lady, and I was talking about my spirituality and she was talking about her religion. And some of my beliefs made her very uncomfortable. And her problem was is she never spoke her truth, but she felt comfortable enough with me to tell me that what my thought process was making her uncomfortable. I said, and I honor that. I absolutely honor that. I said, and if that's what makes you comfortable, you need to go in that direction. I have a different take on it. I go in mine. I said, but we don't need to go to war or to combat. I said, I respect you. Just that's for you. That is what you choose. I'm good with that. She says, my mouth is just open right now. She says, I've never spoke my truth. She says, and it feels so good. I said, of course it does, because when you hold that in, that's a negative emotion. I said, I can guarantee you, if we would have got off this call and you had never said that, you'd be so mad at yourself. Well, why didn't I tell her how I felt? And I said, what you've done is you've released that. And now that can go off into the ethers and be transmuted, because you told me what I felt, what you felt. I said, now don't expect to always be met that way. I said, because there are some people that will want to argue and their way is the only right way. I said, but I want you to remember how it felt to speak your truth about that. Neither one of us having an ego at the time. We were just two people talking. We didn't agree, but we agreed to disagree. And it was a huge learning moment from her, for her. So that was really interesting that just happened yesterday.
Wow, that is remarkable. Well, the acceptance, but also it's funny what you said there, by the way, about the road rage, because when I started working on some of these practices myself, I noticed a difference with that. Of like somebody would cut me up in traffic or do whatever they were doing, and rather than feeling angry with that person, even if there was a small flash at times, I would just think, okay, what are they going through that causes them to behave that way? Has that guy just got a call that, his mum is sick, or his wife's having a baby, he's racing to the hospital, maybe he's having a divorce, or, it was mostly men that cut me up or did things like that more than women, I have to say, but there are some women as well. But I still think, okay, what was it? And I noticed, and it was interesting, that was one of the first shifts early in my practice. I thought, wow, this is really working, rather than just wanting to say something or shout at that person or whatever. So anyway, not to go off on topic, but I just thought it was funny. There's quite a few things you said, but I've been working on them personally, and then you've been saying them today. I've been thinking, wow, that's cool. But anyway, the ego and dropping the ego and moving past that state of consciousness, very very powerful. And if more people did that, what a different place the world would be. And at least more people are doing that. Um, as we move into the practices deeper for this process of the ego, so you mentioned earlier about the Hawaiian practices and some of the things that you're doing, but if you could share a little bit more advice on how people can start to drop that armor a little bit more, because I notice for a lot of people it's very difficult to accept that it even is an armor, but when they can start to accept that and say, okay, maybe I can be safe without this, maybe there is such a thing, they then have to go through a process, as you know very, very well. And I would just like to go deeper into your advice on how people can raise their vibration a little bit more above that and how they can start moving out of that third dimensional existence, basically, as you were talking about earlier. Thank you.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to mention to you is that as humans, we have a tendency to make up stories in our own mind. Like you said, you started thinking, what happened to that person? Maybe they got a phone call. But many people in a lower dimensional frequency, they make up stories and they enrage themselves. More so than the person driving. You just create and create, and your mind goes crazy. So, one
Right.
thing I would tell you is if you don't know, don't make up a story. And release it and let it go. Don't let it eat at you. And we have a tendency to do that. But one of the things for me that was very important in raising my vibration was meditation. And so I meditate all the time. And it can be just, if I get frustrated with technology, I go meditate for 5 or 10 minutes, and I say for every problem there's a solution. And when I come back, I usually figure it out. But meditation was really, really important to me. And people always ask, how do you stop the chatter? And you're going to stop the chatter with breath. If you concentrate on your breath, in and out, the chatter stops and you'll actually go deeper into yourself. And I do want to point out that all answers are internal. We have so much power if we go inside of ourselves and seek our knowledge, seek and it can be ancient knowledge. Just seek your wisdom. What is in there? What is going to drive you? And I do a lot of yoga, and yoga stops the chatter and puts you inside of yourself. And grounding, take your shoes off, walk on grass. One of the things I love now, because I just learned this, is how the birds chirp very early in the morning? They're
Yeah.
waking up the trees. And when they wake up the trees can start producing what keeps us alive. And so when you start delving into connectivity and how we're all connected, you're going to have so much more respect for yourself, but you're going to have more respect and love for fellow humans. And that's when everything starts changing. And you don't even know it, but you'll have a little more patience, or you'll have a question that you can look up. But as you raise your vibration and frequency, those people who are not doing so, you don't meet. They don't really see you anymore. It's a really strange thing, because I would walk by people and I'm like, it's like they don't even see me. Well, what I finally figured out is because we're vibrating faster, we're kind of invisible to them. Now, not that they don't see our physical presence, but they're not interested in us because there's nothing there. We're here, they're there. Not higher, not lower, not good or not bad, but just at a different frequency. And so what I've noticed is all of a sudden the road rage disappears. All of a sudden there's no one trying to cut in that line of 12 groceries in front of me. It's just a really interesting phenomenon that the people that are, maybe still carrying that armor, that ego, they don't interact with me. And I don't interact with them. It's not being rude. I just don't feel, we're just different now.
Wow, that is a fascinating observation, and I say that because once again I've experienced that, and recently, by the way, Nicole, not to go off on a tangent again, but for myself personally, that process has been accelerating, and as I mentioned, for example, even coming here to Cyprus, to this country now, the past sort of couple of years, I've noticed a lot of that drop off, but it's not the move or anything like that. It's been very much my process of my vibration that there's a lot of people I just don't resonate with, and some people would say it's luck because some people have said to me, Liam, you always have good luck. You're in the right place at the right time. Something bad happens, you're not there. It's like, how did you know not to be there? And I have to answer that different ways depending on what's going on. But the truth is, I say, well, I just knew, and sometimes I have to say, look, you wouldn't believe me if I told you, because obviously, as you know, I sensed it. But the point is, that sort of bad luck or those negative experiences stop coming into a person's life. And I noticed that more and more. So it's not to go off on a tangent, but thank you because that's a really nice confirmation for myself personally. So one of the other things is obviously we are talking about your life and we're talking about you leading by example and embodying these practices, living them, being them, and then calling others to do the same. And one of the things that I would like to ask, especially from a non ego perspective, from a higher vibration perspective, is when you have this impact on people, when you encourage people to be the best version of themselves, to live differently, excuse the mosquitoes and everything. That's the only downside of being by the sea, flies, mosquitoes, and everything. But yeah, there's a few around this time of year now. July and August they'll be around. Then September it starts to go down. So it's not too bad. But I don't know if you have this in the States, but every day here, I put lavender around the house and it keeps them away. And then I put like a spray on my body every day to stop them coming. And it's the only downside. Everything else, I mean, this is, it's a small price to pay for this. But this part of the coast, there are a lot now
We
in
have it.
July and
Yeah.
August. Yeah, so you're
We
you're
have it
very
and they love me.
so you're familiar with that. I'm still getting used to it. I mean, bear in mind, it's only coming up on 2 years, not quite 2 years, so I'm still getting used to that. But anyway, coming back to the point at hand, the question is actually very simple: is when you have this positive impact, you said at the beginning that it didn't happen to you, it happened through you. And really, your teaching and your guidance and your inspiration and all of these things is a similar process. It's happening through you to others. So that's why I'm just giving that the context of saying I'm not asking this in any egocentric way. But in other words, when you see people change and develop and grow and become happier and healthier and more fulfilled and all of these things through the work that you do, how do you feel in response to that? I mean, when somebody comes to you, even what you said earlier about that lady, her jaw hit the floor of like, wow, I've never spoken my truth before. This is amazing. And you have that impact. Or I just said something to you now about hey, I've noticed that certain people kind of drop out of your life and it all changes. But that's a really nice confirmation. All of these things that you do to help people, how do you feel when somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, you've helped me to really change my life in this way or that way," if that makes sense?
It does. And I've had it. I have one client that I've been a friend. They're not clients, they're friends. And I've worked with her for probably a year and a half. And she has gone from so many illnesses to healthy and really starting over a new life. And always telling me, thank you. But it's like I live in such gratitude for being able to facilitate that.
Mm,
How lucky am I that I can help someone change their lives just by my words, my actions, my love, or just being there for them. And I remember when I was gifted many, many things like being able to heal with my hands through light weaving and speaking light language to infuse healing into their bodies. And I was told that happened in 20 of 22, and I was told it's going to take a long time for everything to integrate in your body. And so about 6 months ago, I asked my guides, well, am I fully integrated? They said, you're 98% integrated. I said, okay, what's the other 2%? And the answer was, you must believe in yourself. So that was a little bit humbling in terms of, me always asking why me. I was told to ask why not. And basically it's because I do love myself, because I do have a pure heart, because I do want the best for others, because I've gone through those times when life is heavy, when life is painful. And I just have so much empathy for those that are going through it. And when you love yourself and love others, you want the best for everyone, because they're, as they work with you, they raise their vibration and frequency. And I know that they're going to go out and maybe not be able to do everything I do, but they're going to wish the best for others. And I had I had a quote come to me 2 days ago. And it said, one new light illuminates 1,000 new paths. So if I help one person, that's a ripple that's going to help 1,000.
Mm.
Now, how exciting is that? That if we just talk to one person, make them feel better, that they're going to illuminate someone else. That's huge for me.
Absolutely. Well, you definitely do that, and then some. And our talk today will add to that in whichever way it does. But I have a strange example for you because actually the concept of a lighthouse, as soon as we're by the ocean here, in the sense that I heard this quote said to me recently that a lighthouse doesn't run around the island looking for ships to sail. It stands there and shines bright,
Ooh,
and the ships come to it. Words to that effect. I'm slightly paraphrasing that, but in other words, it's something that really I really like about what you're doing. Obviously, transcending the ego, as we've spoken about, that people are authentically drawn to you like the lighthouse, like moths to a flame, in the sense that it's the right time for them, and you help them, and it's a very very wonderful position to be in, as you said, they're being filled with gratitude. I mean, absolutely, why not? But it's a wonderful wonderful description, and I just wanted to ask you because people, I'm sure people focus on the work itself, but I was curious as to how you feel. You mentioned guides there as well, Nicole, as the last sort of two or three topics now. You mentioned your guides, and I would like to touch on that. I meant to touch on it earlier. You said something about guides at the beginning. It slipped my mind. So I'm glad you reminded me of that one, actually. When it comes to tuning in with our guides, I've also heard them called inspirers and a few other names, but suffice to say, we'll call them guides here, as same as I call them. The process people can go through to get more in tune with that guidance. Because I've also noticed that as I do this work on letting go of the ego and vibrating higher, that kind of guidance, that kind of intuition becomes a lot more prominent. And it becomes a lot more. You also said something earlier about the forgiveness that it creates space that within us when we take the anger and some of these other things away, there's more space for the good stuff, there's more space for the bliss, the joy. And I've also noticed, it's a work in progress, but I've also noticed with that guides and intuition and channeled writing. I do a bit as well, by the way, not to go off topic, and a few other things has all become more prominent. But for people who are looking to access that more deeply, not from a place of the ego, from a place of total authenticity, so that they can help others, can you share some tips to, shall we say, tune in a little bit more? Is that a good way to put it?
that's a perfect way to put it. And for me, I call in my ancestors because they're known to me. My grandmother was half American Indian. We always would tease about she's the medicine woman. And so I've got a lineage of very spiritual people on that side. And in knowing that, there is a family lineage, I'm very safe in calling them in. Right now with the world as it is, and there are no veils between worlds now, I'm very cautious. If I just hear something, and universal laws, if you ask, they must tell you. So I'm like, okay, I was that real, or was that someone trying to whisper into my ear for nefarious purposes? Because I have come face to face with some nefarious creatures that live out in the ethers. But to call in your guides, be sure you know who you're dealing with. They should be in a much higher frequency than you to communicate with you. I allow messages to come through the crown, but I will never let anything enter my body, at all. At all. It must be something I hear through my crown, not speak from something that is I'm channeling through my body. I'm very, very picky about that. So to do that meditation as well, and they won't come unless you ask. So you must
Mm.
ask for ancestors, for guidance, for, and always bless it as something that will come to you, you know, freely, openly, and honestly.
Mm. That is very interesting. I have to ask, as soon as we've stumbled upon the topic, only very briefly, what you said there about the sort of, shall we say, the dark and light elements, and or the higher and lower vibrations, or however we like to look at it. I've also had those experiences as well, and I'm just going to ask you a question, partly to confirm, because anyone listening to this might think, okay, well, that's a relief. I'm not crazy then, so that's good. Because I am a step beyond that, but I have been wondering that I've experienced situations where I'm basically trying to level up with the light work. It's not a very good term, but for want of a better term, to increase something. And then I also experienced some degree of opposition at times from darker forces, just using that term very loosely. And I've always just carried on because I've always thought, well, I'm not going to give that my attention. I'm going to just give more of my attention to the light and the positivity and the positive emotions. But since this recent shift I was telling you about, especially since moving here, I've noticed a difference where sometimes I meet people and I can feel those negative forces around them, around the other persons, not so much around me. I think, oh, that must be on a different vibration. And I don't say that in a judgmental way at all. I don't say that in any ego of being better than them or anything. But it's actually just taken me aback at times. I thought, gosh, that must have been there before, but I never noticed it. So my question here is fundamentally how people can be careful, as you said that they have to be careful, and how they can, if they do experience a negative force like that, how they can not let it bother them or get to them. Only because I feel that within the spiritual, anybody or most people you speak to in a spiritual world, if you like, always say, well, there's love and light. And I say, yeah, but look, I've had one or two negative experiences here. And they say, oh, no, there's none of that. It's just love and light. And I say, now, hold on a minute. I'm sitting here now. I mean, the sun's going to go down. It's going to get dark and cold. You can't have one without the other. So there must be something. So I would like to address that, um, just to break down the barriers and make people feel less alone if they've had those kinds of experiences. That's hopefully that gives the context as to why I'm asking. Thank you,
Yeah,
Nicole.
and that's perfect because this is a planet of duality, light and dark, small, large, you know, it
Mm.
just is. And right now with no veil between worlds, you've got a lot of things infiltrating. And what people want this love and light world, but that's not a reality. That is absolutely not a reality. We can do the best we can, but what I always tell people is guard your energy, because once you get into a higher state, you, like you said, you can walk by someone and you're going to feel that. It's a thickness, a density. You absolutely can, like, when you spread out your energy, and that's what I do when I go out. I tell people all the time, guard your energy. That's the one thing that you've got to do, is you've got to guard your energy. If someone gets close enough or thinks about you even, they can plant a cord in you. They can plant their cord because there's something in you. They see light in you that they don't have. And they're like, I would like that. I would like that. And so, people that kind of bounce into you or whatever when you're walking, all of a sudden you're like, eh. That's what they're doing. They're planting a cord. They're energy vampires. I mean, if there's good, there's bad. Energy vampires are bad. And what they want is they want something they don't have. So they're going to pull it from you. And so the darkness is absolutely true. I have astral traveled into the ethers. I have fought demons. I have astral to the dark side of the moon and came face to face with a little gray alien. It's real. It is real. Love and light would be great for everything, but it's just not a reality. It's just not. So, just what I tell people, put your energy out during the day, pull it in at night, because you don't want things sneaking in at the night. Pull it in, but guard it. You don't let a stranger hug you. You don't know what they're doing that for. You don't know what they want. And I don't give out any of my energy. That is mine. That is precious. That is holy. And you are not taking it from me.
I love that. Well, it's actually very reassuring, for myself personally, obviously, but I hope for many other people listening to this. As I've already said, I mean, I've already stated how I feel about that, but a lot of times people bring that up and it just gets shut down. And the other thing is, as I mentioned earlier as well, when I've met people, particularly some of these people who were on a very low vibration, like people who used to be criminals and things, and now they've reformed. I have a few friends who now they do youth work and they do all sorts of genuinely good work. But I've actually asked them and said, hey, when you were in this place, did you ever experience anything like this? People who are open, they say, oh, absolutely. When I was around something violent, or there's one friend of mine who used to be like a bouncer, basically. He ran one of the top security firms in the UK, and he's now a very spiritual guy. And I asked him, I said, hey, when you were doing that, did you? He said, oh, absolutely. He said, that's what actually caused me to stop. He actually said it wasn't, well, in his case, it wasn't the light, it was the dark scared him so much. He thought, I can't do this anymore. And then decided to change. So it's very interesting to just share both sides of the coin. Now, Nicole, we're coming up on about an hour, which is roughly speaking what I like to keep these to, only because I find that that's a good length for people to be able to absorb the information, but actually put it into practice, which is very important. That people walk away and don't just think, oh, well, that was interesting, but they actually think, right, I'm going to make some notes here. I'm going to start to actually try some of these things, or if I'm already trying something, I'm going to adapt it a little bit. And I feel that our talk today has been wonderful in that sense, in the sense of guidance and in the sense of helping people. But my last question for you is a very easy one, because if people are listening to this and they would like to contact you directly to know more, obviously they can read about you, they can read your book, they can do these various things. But in terms of one-on-one sessions and the work you do, or group sessions, or however you run the more personal work that you do with people, can we give that a shout out, please? Because some people listening to this will think, okay, that's great, I'm going to go away and apply some of this. And some people will feel that pull of saying, actually, I want to work with Nicole directly. So we need to give that a mention. And then I think we'll wrap this up. But I would like to for you to give a shout out to the relevant contact points, please. Thank you.
Perfect. And this is something I probably would have never done even 5 years ago, but I so believe in what I'm doing and so believe in myself. That's who I branded. So everything, everywhere you're going to find me, whether it's Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, I'm Nicole Harvick. That's who I am. And you can contact me by email if you would like at nicoleharvick@gmail.com. So if you remember this name, you're going to find me somewhere.
Well, that is really good to mention. And it's also important because of your accessibility. And I mean that in a nice way, that I reach out to people for interviews all of the time, and responses vary depending on the vibrational level, obviously, even amongst teachers, as I'm sure you and coaches, as you realize. But yeah, for anyone who has those relevant and purposeful requests for you, I know they can reach out, and I am just putting that out there for our audience, because yeah, some people will feel the pull. So we've talked about some great topics. Now, the funny thing whenever I come to wrap up an interview like this is I'm always aware that we've only just scratched the surface in a lot of ways. But at the same time, we've had some lovely questions in here for people at all levels. And I don't mean the levels from an ego point of view. I mean the levels from the point of view of wherever they are on the path, whether they're just curious, whether they're, really far along, but they've kind of hit an impasse, whether they're this point, that point, that we've kind of covered something for different points. So I think that's very special. And the beautiful thing, I feel drawn to tell you this as well, even though you'll know this, Nicole. The beautiful thing about this is we will put this out there, and it'll help some people, when on the day we put it out, next week, next month. But the fact that I do podcasts, and one of the things I love about podcasts is 5 years from now, somebody could listen to this at a point in time when they are ready. And I look at podcasts I've done, 4 or 5 years ago or whatever, and people are still listening to them now because they've got to a point where they are ready to hear that, and then they've been drawn, or they've somehow come across it with the synchronistic processes that always happen. And I feel very I feel that feeling with what we're doing today, that it'll help some people as soon as we put it out there, but it has a much longer term approach that some people will be ready in a longer period of time, and they'll think, you know what, I need to check out this interview. So that's a beautiful thing. Like you said earlier, if we help even one person and bring them to the light, bring them to a higher vibration, we've done our work. But I've got no doubt that it will be more than that. So I just want to thank you so much for being an open book, for being so vulnerable and open and sharing so many powerful lessons, and for being great fun to talk with. Because that's the other
Oh,
thing. I
thank
really
you.
enjoyed it. I mean, we've met for the first time today, but I feel like we've met before, and it's a lovely feeling. So thank you so much for that as well. And I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I
Oh, I
have.
love it. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been wonderful.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I will let you go to carry on with your day, as you've got the rest of your day to go, more or less, or a lot of it. It's about 6 p.m. here now, so it's coming to the end of mine. But no, I hope that our paths cross again, and I hope that we connect again in the future. I will send you this, by the way, when I release as well. So if you have any uses for that, and other than that, would love to keep in touch with you, and I'm sure we can work together again.
Absolutely. I would love to keep in touch with you as well because there's so much more to talk about.
Oh, so much more. I know. I'm very excited to see where the flow takes us with that one, and I feel that. I've also got a few other things in the pipeline this side that might be of interest to you as well. So I'll keep you updated, and yeah, we'll keep in touch 100%. But for now, Nicole, thank you again, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and we'll speak soon for sure.
Okay. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Bye bye.
Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.